Hi everyone, welcome. Before we get started with the event, I think it's good to introduce myself. I'm Jochem, I work at Fiction Factory, that's also where we're located right now. To tell you something about Fiction Factory, we're one of the producers that Avant works with quite often. We've been around for over 30 years now, and we're a set and interior construction company. So we're a team of 60 people, consisting of welders, woodworkers, we have an upholstery department, a paint workshop, we do electronics, we have engineers working here, and project managers such as myself. Besides the work we do for Avant Art, we have a lot of different clients. So we do a lot of work for museums, such as, for example, the Rijksmuseum in Amsterdam. We do interiors for hotels and restaurants, retail spaces. We do a lot for Nike, for example, or shop windows for Hermes. Besides that, we also have a sister company located on the same space that we are at. They build tiny houses. It's called House. So we do a lot of different things. And of course, the specials that we do for Avant Art, mainly sculptures. We started working with Avant Art about 3 years ago. We got in touch about a project for a brass frame that we never ended up making, actually. And after that, we just kept in touch and started sort of like organically to make the boxes for the sculptures that Avant Art was moving towards more and more. And based on that, we got to know each other a bit better, and also Avant Art started to understand the things that we could do. So then they suggested to start working on sculpture editions together. So some of the editions that we worked on are scattered around the room around me. So for example, the Elm Green and Drexit editions we produced here, and also the Pole Insect Sweetie Jar. It was something we did in collaboration with the Glass Studio, that's also right next to us, Van Tetterode. And also we worked on the edition of Mr. Star City, of which you see a miniature version right in front of me. So the vases and the stems we did with the Glass Studio, and then Miranda, my colleague, made all these lovely hats. And of course, we're also working on this piece that we're going to talk about today by Adriana. And Avant Art came to our workshop to shoot a video basically of all the steps that we take to get to the final product that you've maybe already seen on the website. And the video sort of explains all the steps that we need to take in order to get to the final product. So it's a video of 10 minutes, which I'll basically talk you through. Then during the video, you're free to ask any questions that you have. After the video, we'll take some time to answer those questions. Yeah, so I guess let's just start the video. So this is our workshop. It's located in the north of Amsterdam. It's packed with 1,000 solar panels on the roof, so we try to be as sustainable as possible. So when the request came in for this project in January this year, we first sort of like started talking about the ideas for different materials. So basically we got this vector file from Adriana, and we started to think about, okay, how can we make this 2D piece into something that's more sort of like 3D and layered? So the suggestion from the artist in Avant Art was to build something up out of different sheets of metal. And then we started thinking, okay, what types of metal could we use for this product? And also how can we color the metal so it corresponds to the use of the vector file? To have something that we can hang on the wall, we also decided that we needed like a base material. So that's why we chose a black MDF, which you see pictured here. For the aluminium, I'll start talking about that a bit after explaining the base of this work. So the nice thing about the black MDF is that it's colored through and through, so it's black throughout. And it matches the colors of the artwork quite nicely. And also what we thought would be important is to have something that feels quite solid to put on the wall. Then we CNC basically the outline of the artwork. We do that all in-house. So we decided on what the size should be. You see here how it's being CNC'd. And it's CNC'd out of two different parts. So you have the main body, and then you also have the hand which holds the cigarette. Because there are some sharp lines in the artwork, we need to CNC that separately and then glue the two pieces together, because otherwise you would never get the sharp lines of the original artwork. Then after it's been CNC'd, the edges are still a bit rough and sharp. So what we then need to do is basically sand everything, or at least the edges, we need to sand again by hand. So all these pieces are then treated by Miranda, who you see walking into the frame right here. Miranda is one of the people who's been with Fiction Factory for quite a long time. She's been working here for over 10 years. And she's also worked on pretty much all of the Avant art projects. So she's the one who made these lovely hats, for example, and also the miniature clothes for the Elm Green and Drexel edition. So we not only sand it, but we sand it because we want to have a coating on top of the black MDF as well. That's basically to protect it from fingerprints, but also to sort of like bring out the color. So you can see here, as Miranda is applying the oil, it gives sort of like a wet look to the MDF, which brings out the color a lot more, and then that way it connects more to the colors in the artwork, which you'll see later. In the back of the MDF panels, you can also see there's two recessed holes. So that's for the hanging structure. The nice thing about the fact that it's 18 mil MDF is that we could recess the hanging structure in there. That way, when you mount the work on the wall, it sits flush against the wall, which is something that we wanted to do from the beginning. Then also we decided to have this mounting system that's adjustable. So in case your floor is crooked or your ceiling's crooked, which is the case pretty much at least in every house in Amsterdam, you can still level it so that it still looks level, even though your house is not level. Then after this, let's move on to the aluminium parts. So what we did is we basically took apart the drawing by Adriana and separated all the different elements, and then started playing around with how can we build up something that's 2D to something that's 3D. So we thought it would be nice to have different layers of thickness of the different materials. So the detailed parts, they're quite thin, and then the more sort of like robust or bigger parts of the image we decided to make thicker. The nice thing about like doing this digitally is that of course we can sort of like see what the end result will look like, sort of, and also share that with the artist and Avant art. From there, once we've sort of like agreed on, okay, it should roughly look like this, that's when we start making a prototype. So we send all these files to our steel supplier. We chose for aluminium because it's still relatively a lightweight material, but it's very much a metal. Because we wanted to make sure that when you mount something on the wall, it's not too heavy for just a general wall. When we put in the order with our steel supplier, we do that through an online platform actually, which already tells us immediately which parts are too small to be laser cut. So those parts we had to sort of like, draw as if they were one part. So we added like little stems in between the little parts. And then afterwards, when they come back from the steel supplier, we had to separate all the parts again and then make sure that they become the parts as in the drawing by Adriana. So you see me walking around with aluminium here, but actually that part was outsourced. Then we have Miranda, who worked with two other people on sanding all the bits, because when the aluminium comes back from the laser cutter, the edges are still very rough, and also the material, because it's industrial aluminium, still contains some dents and things like that. So we wanted to make sure that the surface of the aluminium was smooth enough to create a smooth surface also for the coating. But then the edges, we still wanted to make sure that you could still very much see that it's laser cut aluminium. So those are, we just took the sharp edges off basically, so that they don't scratch into each other when we apply the different layers on top of each other. But we still very much wanted it to, yeah, feel and look like aluminium, even though it's coated after. So in total, we had to hand finish 2,500 pieces of metal, some bigger, some very, very small. And then we decided on like which part was which color. That of course we did in collaboration with Adriana and Avant to translate the digital colors into colors that would work in real life, or in, well, I guess in real life, I mean like on in paint terms. We then had to package all the parts separately again to send those off to the coater. That's also something we do externally, because all the paint jobs that we do ourselves, we do by hand and we don't spray anything. So we had to work with an external industrial coater, and it's quite hard to find partners who want to do this kind of job, because it requires a lot of attention to detail, and also, yeah, not everyone wants to put in this much love into a work like this. But happily, luckily, we've been working with this partner for I think over 15 years now. So yeah, he was willing to take on the challenge of coating all these miniature parts, and then having them sent back to us. Choosing the colors was quite a challenge. So we did most of that actually in-house. So first we tried some colors with paint just in our own workshop, and then before we actually had the prototype coated, to make sure that the colors actually were sort of like to our liking and also to Adriana's liking, of course. So what you see here is what the piece would have looked like if it wasn't coated. This is also an option that we discussed at one point during the project. Like, what if we use steel actually and then age it, so age the different parts in different ways, so that the different pieces get different colors. However, we then decided that it was a bit risky because it's quite hard to stop the aging process of steel. So even though the pieces would look really nice when we're done with the project, we don't know what they'll look like in a few months. So that's why we decided to go with the coating, because also it's yeah, you know, closer to the actual artwork by Adriana, and yeah, it's a lot more safe, let's say. So when we receive all the parts back from the coater, this is the part where we're now in the process, is that all these pieces are glued on one by hand, actually, by a team of 3. So for the bigger parts, we use a sort of like a heavy grade sealant, and for the smaller parts, we use a instant glue, an aluminum instant glue. And each sculpture consists of 44 parts, so it takes quite a while to get one of these finished up to the level that we require. And here you can see the final product. So we're working on these at the moment, and I'm excited to see what they will look like on people's walls. So that's going to happen very soon, hopefully. So that's very quickly all the steps that we needed to take. As I said, we've been working on this since January, so the 10 minutes reflect a period of yeah, almost a year. So I've skipped some of the steps, I guess. I guess now would be a good time to move on to questions, if there are any. And Roline of Avant, who's sitting across from me, will be the person moderating the questions.
Hey guys, I'm just reading the chat for Jochem. So if you have any extra questions, just leave them below. But I see that we have a few already. First one, someone wants to know, what has been the most difficult project that you've done for Avant?
Oh, that's a good question. I think the most challenging projects were definitely the ones that involve glass, because it's such a difficult material to work with and it's so hard to predict. So I guess the most difficult project was probably for Ball Insect, creating the sweetie jars, because we've combined steel with glass, which generally isn't a very good combination. So in order to make that work and to make something that's so top heavy sort of like stand by itself, that was quite a challenge. But it was also, I think, yeah, that's why it was also very fun to work on at the same time. And Paul Insect was also very much involved in this project, which also made it quite fun.
Oh, nice. Okay, someone else wants to know, what was your favorite project to work on so far?
My favorite project, I think, is probably still the first project that I did for Avant Art. We made the elm green and Andrexit piece called The Future, which had this little kid sort of like sitting on a balcony for people that have seen it. It was quite fun to like think of like all the steps that we needed to take to create this piece, or like recreate basically a smaller version of this already big piece that existed. I think the most fun part of that project was trying to find someone that we could 3D scan that actually looked like the boy in the original work. So we basically went through families and friends to find someone who looked exactly like it. And yeah.
Oh yeah, I remember seeing pictures of that.
And then we 3D scanned him in the exact position of the original work.
So someone also wants to know, how long does a sculpture edition take? Though I think that probably depends very much on which sculpture it is. But maybe for this one, how long did it take?
Yeah, so for this one, yeah, as I mentioned, we started in January. So yeah, it took a bit less than a year. But yeah, for other projects, it can take longer. And also, yeah, it depends on sort of like the complexity of the project, of course. And also, I think what's most difficult to predict how long the prototyping will take, because sometimes what we really like about working with Avant Art is that we get these requests for things that aren't necessarily possible, but we still sort of like to go into these type of projects and then sort of like just to see where it'll end and how we can make something work. So that's why sometimes the prototype phase of these sculpture editions can take quite long. Yeah.
And someone wants to know, how does the work hang?
Oh yeah, so as you've seen on the video, there's two recessed holes at the back, and basically what you do is you screw two holes into the wall for plugs and screws, and then the two holes have these adjustables or like rings in it, which go over your screws basically. So it hangs very much like a framed work. Yeah.
It should be quite self-explanatory, I think, when you see the work. But for the person who asked this question, if you receive it and you're still wondering how to do it, you can always just contact us and we'll help you figure it out. Let me find another. Someone asked, what material is the most difficult to work with? But I think you already said it's glass, right? Yeah,
it's definitely glass. I think every project that I do in glass, like the more projects I've done with glass, every time I think like, okay, now I know everything. Like, you know, I know how to predict this material and I know what's possible and what's not possible. And then you use a color that you've never used, and then it turns out that the glass responds differently when like that particular color is added, and then you basically have to start all over again thinking about glass. So yeah, also the most stressful material to work with, because you have to work with it while it's hot, so you cannot really like sort of like stand still and think, okay, you know, how can we solve this issue? Like if you stand still, the thing breaks and you have to start over.
So this is maybe a bit of a difficult question, but okay. Someone asks, can you estimate how many hours it took to make each piece of art? So they heard that it took a year, but any guess how many hours per piece? I guess that's probably more about assembling it.
Oh yeah, so I guess the assembly of one part, like, so basically we have, as I said, we have a team of 3 and they're like lined up. So there's one person taking part of the bigger parts, and then there's one person sort of like taking part of the medium parts, and then there's one person just doing like the really tiny parts, because basically they're most skilled to do the very tiny parts. But I think like if you would put those all 3 in a row, I guess it would take around, I guess like 2 hours to create, like to do the assembly, but like the amount of hours that went into prototyping and also like, basically trying things out, and then engineering, coating, and I think the most lengthy part of this whole process was sending the 2,500 pieces of aluminium to make them fit for coating. Yeah, I should know this, how many hours it took, but also I feel like I don't even want to know at this point. It took a lot of hours, yeah.
So someone asked, is it the first time that you've done like a multi-layer metal sculpture like this?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, we've done works with metal before, but for me, yeah, it's the first time we've done something out of so many different pieces of aluminium, and also yeah, in so many like different variations of thickness. So yeah, this is a first for us. Yeah.
And then someone also wants to know how you go about choosing the different materials as a company, and like, does sustainability like play a role in that?
Yeah, so we're quite big on sustainability. I think also for so for example, the MDF material, for example, that you've seen is not per se like the most sustainable sheet material, but what we are now working on, we're in a project with the EU that we're running, because you have a lot of like leftover space whenever you see something. You try to like nest it in such a way that you don't have, or you have as little waste material as possible. So we've now created this platform for artists and designers where they can sort of like see what space we have left over, and they can sort of like add their smaller parts that they need for a work or a design to something that's already like being seen anyway, which in theory, of course, like reduces your waste by a lot. So this is something that we're piloting now, and also are looking at sort of like expanding to different producers like us, because yeah, would be a great way to save material.
So what would you say is your favorite material to work with?
My favorite material to work with, I think, I think steel probably, because there's so many possibilities, and also like steel is 100% recyclable, which is like of course like producing steel like requires a lot of energy, but the fact that you can then like reuse the whole thing again is quite nice. And also what I like is, and also for like the project that we did for Avant Arte show this, is that we have these, you can make these really like tiny things with steel, but we also make these huge projects with steel. So, you know, we also create staircases out of steel, for example. Yeah, I think it's the most versatile material.
And I also see someone asked which part of Adriana's work took the longest to complete.
Which part?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, definitely like making all the aluminium parts ready for coating. That like I heavily underestimated how long that would take. Yeah, so that definitely took the longest of the whole run.
All right, and then I think there's one more question. If anybody has more, you gotta put them in now. Otherwise, this will be the last one. But someone wants to know, how did you get into sculpture making?
Oh, we got into sculpture making. Well, we've made more sculptures in the past, but the fact that we're making more sculptures now is actually purely because of Avant Arte. As I said, like we got to know each other quite randomly, I think, and then we started making all these boxes, and then all of a sudden we got requests for these sculptures. And I think like what works really well between us and Avant Arte is that we have all these different departments in house. So especially for the mixed media works or mixed media sculptures, we're quite good at prototyping those and also then manufacturing those, because we have a lot of people working here with knowledge of different materials. So like whatever I do, for example, when I get a request in for a project where I think what the hell, which is generally what I think when I get a request from Avant Arte, there's so many people that I can run to, and Mirana is definitely one of them, to like show them like how would you make this, and there's so many different, I get so many different suggestions from different people that I guess that's why it's working quite well, this collaboration between us and Avant Art.
Oh, well, amazing. That was all the questions. So I think we're going to leave it here. But thanks, guys, for watching. And see you on the next one.
Thank you.